All right, we have a phenomenal show for you today. We're going to be bringing in our special guest here in a few minutes, Mr. Tim Ekstrom from the Royal Star. Before we get going, though, I want to welcome everybody. Thank you all for joining us today on our podcast. This is going to be a really good one. I hope you're all excited about it as I am. I am super excited to have this as a guest on our podcast here today. Tim's a wealth of knowledge, and we're going to have a really good time kicking back and talking to him for a while. The hour is going to fly by for me, and I know it will for all of you. But before we get going, gang, Pacific Sport Fishing Alliance is our number one sponsor for our Friday special guest podcast. I want you to make sure you go over there and check out Pacific Sport Fishing Alliance. Check out Larry and the boys over there. They got some great trips coming up. They got a charter, limited load charter coming up on the Success. You can see all that. Just grab that QR code right there on the bottom of the screen. Hit it with your phone, go over there and check everything out. And then I believe Larry's getting ready to launch a contest. He's up in Alaska right now at the lodge up there, but we're going to launch a contest. So make sure you check out Pacific Sport Fishing Alliance and all the cool things they have to offer us as fishermen. And we're going to get going here in just a second, gang. I'm going to welcome in Tim Ekstrom from the Royal Star and so many other things. You'll be blown away by all the things that he's involved in. So, hey, Tim, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Good afternoon. I'm so glad to be here. What a great opportunity.
Oh, my gosh. My dad just thought of you as just whenever you were on the radio, whenever you were talking on Pete's show or everything, my dad would always, and I have a problem with shutting up, as you know. And he would just say, shut up, it's Tim. I got to hear what he's got to say, which I know you loved my father a lot, but to have my father say, hey, I got to listen to Tim, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it was a huge honor. I mean, it's an honor to know him. And you know, for whatever reason, you know, there's those people in the world that you just have an automatic connection with. Like from the first time I met your dad, you know, he's just one of those people that, you know, we just were simpatico. You know, he was really good. You know, speaking of a wealth of knowledge, I mean, he was the well of knowledge, and he was so politically adept and so gifted in just his ability to communicate directly. I really learned a lot from him. I didn't, you know, relatively speaking, I didn't spend that much time in his company, but you know, again, he's one of those people that just had such talent that if you pay attention, you learn an awful lot of in a short period of time.
Oh, it was unbelievable the way he was able to know both sides and what they were going to say before they ever said it. When I went to the meetings with them, I was like, how did you already know what they were going to say? He knew both sides. He was phenomenal at that political thing.
Yeah, and he was really good at navigating it without, you know, I mean, you can't, you're always on one side of the line or the other, and he just did a great job of stating his positions, of maintaining and in doing so building consensus, maintaining the peace. I mean, he just had a gift for it. That's of course why he was such an accomplished individual. He was again, I feel very, very fortunate to have had the amount of time to in his company that I did, and I learned a hell of a lot from him, that's for sure.
Oh my gosh, thank you. So did I. The thing most people don't understand, I know you do and the industry does, but if it wasn't for all the work that he did in the back, this industry would have been not here right now, because you remember what it was like in 2013, 2014, and they took our bluefin away, you remember. We were allowed to have this many. Zero, gang, you don't understand. We were allowed to have zero. My father flew all over the world fighting to make sure. And can you imagine if we couldn't have any bluefin right now, Tim?
You know, actually, no, I can't imagine that, because I can't imagine the premise of it. I couldn't imagine the result of it. I mean, the result is we'd be out of business, you know, I mean, or we'd be, you know, depending on lizard fish or whatever the heck, you know, I mean, there's, as far as offshore game fish, it really would have been a very, very tough cycle for us. It's happened to coincide with this, you know, dearth of albacore that who knows if Southern California waters, you know, Northern Baja is ever going to see albacore again. Who knows? You know, I keep telling myself that it's inevitable. It's a cycle. It's it was basically on a 10-year cycle, but obviously that's been blown up here now. I mean, this is a whole new phenomena we're witnessing to this with this bluefin cycle, but thank goodness for them. And I got to tell you, I'm sure some of the other guests this year have talked about it, that the volume of bluefin this year, again, it's just stunning. Like I don't even know how to describe how much fish we're looking at times. And this is between Catalina and San Clemente, between San Nicolas and where we would, you see a school, and number one, it's up on the surface. It's what we call a breezer, a big flat spot. And you see a spot of fish, and it's so big that you don't know if you're looking at a spot of fish. I mean, it covers a mile, like a square mile, one school of fish. You can't believe it's all fish. You're looking at it going, is that a breezer? Like it can't be. And then, you'll see a fish flipping or whatever. And you get up to it, you start driving into it, and there's 30 fathoms of fish on the fathometer, right? So there's 180 feet thick of fish, and you drive and you drive and you drive and you drive. And I mean, for a half a mile you drive, and there's never less than 30 fathoms of fish under the boat. And it's just, the sonar is completely, it looks like you're going to hit the bottom. I mean, how much fish is that? You know what I mean? Who knows? We had just last week, the pilot Drew, he was up in the air in the afternoon. He was working for some other guys, but we were talking on the radio, and he said, I see 15,000 tons of fish around you guys right now. 15,000 tons just in the area that we were in there, by the snail up there. I mean, and meanwhile, all these guys are clobbering them 60 miles to the south of us, and there's guys seeing giant schools 15 miles to the northwest of that. And I mean, it's just like, what an incredible cycle. Thank goodness for it. Going back to it, could you imagine us looking at this much bluefin and not being able to keep one?
Can't keep any. And that was one of the things that people don't understand, how hard my father was fighting. His fleet of boats in Dana Point, it really wasn't going to benefit him in any way, shape, or form. But you know what? He knew that he needed to get in there and get dirty and nasty and get in there and make sure that we had this fish.
Yeah,
I was
a big part of that too. I mean, it was again, it was one of those pull out all the stops. It was the Alamo for us, if you will. And fortunately, I'll tell you, at the time, cutting back from 5 a day to 2 a day, from 15 total to 6 total, even at that time, I was satisfied with that because, I've my history, if and everybody watching knows, I'm very environmentally conscious. I mean, I'm a fisherman. I go out and we catch fish, we take fish. I want to catch them, but at the same time, I'm very aware that we need to be forward thinking about maintaining the health of the resource, and the number one way we do that is by not taking or keeping more than we need. So I was real satisfied with 6 bluefin on a 3-day trip or 8-day trip, whatever, or 2 bluefin in a day. That's enough, and it's still enough. And I know there's been talk going around that the bluefin is in such good shape that they're going to increase the commercial quotas potentially, and they're even talking about potentially increasing the recreational limit. We don't need to. We don't. I mean, 6 is enough. If an angler goes out there, especially with the size most of this fish is, I mean, somebody goes out there and catches 6 or 300 pounders, man, that's a huge amount of fish, and more than enough to justify the whole endeavor as far as I'm concerned. It's plenty to share with family and friends for a good long time.
Oh yeah, and as you know, bluefin are great raw. They don't cook very well, though. They're not a real good cooking fish.
Yeah, as long as you'd probably. I'm a big fish eater myself. My whole family. I mean, they've been raised on it. I love canning it. I do my own home canning. Bluefin in the jar is just incredible because it's got a higher oil content. It's incredible. But if you do cook it, which we do plenty, stir fry, whatever, it's just you just can't overcook it. You almost have to. You got to stop cooking it when it's still a little raw in the center. Otherwise, it's overcooked in 1 minute.
Right. So Tim, we got way ahead of ourselves, and I like to start the show off kind of giving everybody, because we got a lot of audience back east that don't know who you are. We've got a lot of audience in Texas, don't know who you are. The West Coast, we know you. You're infamous with the RSW and the long range fishing and where you came from and how you've been. But how did you get into this fishing thing? What happened? Did your dad, your mom, who got you in? Because you had to start.
Yeah, and it's a pretty cool story. I mean, I was the quintessential dock rat. You know, my dad introduced my brother and I. My brother's also in the fishing industry. He sport fished for a while. He's been commercial fishing for a long time. You know, fishing in the squid fleet. But both he and I, we grew up down by the beach. My dad would take us fishing on the sport boats, and when my dad and my mom split up, anyway, my mom, you know, classic single mother story, you know, raising two boys. We were a couple of years apart, and she had to work, and she used to drop us off down at Mission Bay at the docks. That was daycare in the summertime. I mean, like, we'd either ride the bus down there or she'd drop us off, and then we were, you know, 8, 10 years old, you know, 12 years old, 10 years old, and we just gravitated towards the water. I mean, it was for everything from catching jack smelt and queenfish on the pier to, we were always on the docks. You know, it didn't take very long. All the guys in the boats knew us. You know, we'd pile on the boats when they turned over the half day trip, and, you know, make a nuisance of ourselves or try to be helpful, get in their way. And once in a while, I remember that the fare, the child's fare back then was $5. It was $5. So we'd scratch together $5, you know, my brother and I, and God forbid, I mean, I'll say it, DFG might track me down, but we used to catch mackerel and sell them to people, you know, for $0.25 a piece, you know, to scratch up the $5 at 10, 12 years old, you know, resourceful little guys, you know, to try to get out on that afternoon trip. I remember that the Seaforth was a landing that we hung around. And when we would scratch up enough money to go on the afternoon run, the people in the office would call my mom and let them know, you know, that we were going to go out on the boats. Of course, everybody was on a first name basis, but that's how it started. And when I, you know, a couple things, how life goes on, there was a little period of time where we kind of graduated away from the docks. We weren't hanging around there as much, but we still spent as much time fishing as we could. You know, we loved it. I was always a real waterman my whole life, surfing, fishing, you know, being around, growing up around the beach areas. But when I was 13 or when I was 14 is when I officially, like, I started working. I showed up one day to go fishing, and the guys, you know, they obviously we all knew one another. They knew I knew how to fish, and they asked if I could go out, you know, the next day and help out. And one thing led to another.
What happened?
We still on?
Yeah, they are.
Oh, good. Yeah. No, one thing led to another. And, you know, before I knew it, I was, you know, I was 15, 16, working on the Pacific Queen with Eddie McEwen, who was a huge mentor to me. Had a big impact on my life. I actually had, I probably had a little too much free time on my hands. I won't go into great detail, but I had a little too much free time on my hands when I was 15 and got in a little trouble. And you know, it could have been more than a little bit of trouble, but fortunately, through an opportunity I had to go out and fish on the boat and stay fishing with some oversight that those that were in the position of authority were satisfied with. I was able to dodge some of the more punitive consequences, let's say, of my, you know, my ill thought of schemes, whatever they were. Anyway, Eddie was he had a huge impact ultimately on the direction of my life, because I decided when I was 16 working on that Pacific Queen, I was pretty dead set on that's what I wanted to do as far as, you know, my professional pursuit. You know, in the end, that was a huge advantage for me. I don't think most kids, when they're, you know, 14, 15, 16, know what they want to do, you know, in the long run. And what that led to, in addition to all the experience that I gained working there with Eddie, but I accumulated enough sea time to get my captain's license when I was 19. I mean, it was like, I think if I remember right, I sat for my test just a few weeks after my 19th birthday, which is that's the earliest you can get your license, or it was when I got mine. So it was a real leg up, you know. When I was a young guy, I went from the Pacific Queen. I had an opportunity to go to work for Frank on Royal Polaris, and when I started working with him, I was 19, and I had my captain's license, and obviously had accumulated quite a bit of experience. I knew about boats. I was always gifted mechanically, so I was a capable chief engineer, and just I rose through the ranks quickly. There was an opportunity there on Frank's boat, and then I got to give Frank as much credit, if not more, in my youth for his confidence. I mean, as far as my development, trajectory, professional trajectory, I don't know if you knew this, but I ran my first long range trip when I was 21 on Royal Polaris.
Oh my God, no, I had no idea.
Yeah,
Wow.
my first trip. I was the youngest guy in the boat. It was a 5-day trip after Christmas. But think about Frank and his confidence in me and my ability at that time. I mean, that's a pretty big leap of faith. I mean, I think about it now, what I know, and it's like, man, that would have to be a real superstar in order for me to turn a 21-year-old loose with my long range boat. You know what I mean? And he did, and it all turned out great. Boat ran great, went down, caught fish. Ran a great trip, and the rest was history. I mean, I ran my first 16-day. It was a 17-day when I was 22.
Wow.
I know.
Wow, Tim, that is insane.
I know. You think about it, and just again, you just overlay that on everything that I know now. The scope of the responsibility, but it was, I mean, I loved it. I absolutely, I still love it. It's why I do it. It's why I've had, I've had just most incredible opportunities, and I think that that's the foundation of the whole thing. I mean, I've been very sincere about it in my drive, and from the beginning, and it comes from the heart. I mean, I loved fishing, man. I love fishing, love going out on the water. I loved the responsibility of running the show, and I also really I really enjoy introducing it more so now. I mean, I've always liked working with people, but I really enjoy introducing anglers to the magic of the ocean. Just the most unbelievable experiences that occur out there. And I have this. There was a line that I remembered it from it was a Jack London story, but I it's amazing to me how what is so commonplace to us, those of us who spend our life out in the water, these amazing things happen. Whether it's I don't know, 100-foot whale jumping out of the water in front of the boat, or sharks eat fish, any myriad of natural wonders that occur. That's just like a commonplace event for us. You know what I mean? It's like, well, it's just another day in the water. Giant shark jumped out of the water next to the boat, bit a fish in half right in front of us, or whatever. But that gives me so much joy to be able to introduce so many people to those kind of experiences that you can't get them anywhere else. You just can't. They're not available. You know what I mean? You see nature that raw. It doesn't happen anywhere else. I mean, maybe out in the whatever, out in the tundra or something, but it's not. The ocean is still, and not very far away from major civilization hubs. The ocean is still the last frontier. It absolutely is. You don't have to go that far away and you're out there in the middle of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the most incredible thing I think back now is as I'm a content creator and I make all these great videos and all these people watch and everything, and I think, man, I wish I would have known then what I know now. Because, like you said, we see a shark bite a fish in half, but we see that like every day. But if we film it and put it on social media, people would be blown away. The stuff that we see on a daily basis just blows people's minds. And I know I never got to do the long range experience. The things that you've seen are just mind boggling compared to what I've seen. And the things that you see today, still right now, like you say, not very far off the beach, you're seeing these schools of bluefin that we and I have never, that my father didn't see in his lifetime in his 87 years on the planet.
Yeah, you and I were talking about it earlier. I like a great example of that. When I was in my youth in long range fishing, was really the only place that the only venue that a young guy could work in, either that or commercial fishing, where you were really out on the edge and you saw that caliber of fishing that was spectacular beyond anyone's imagination. Certainly anybody that had worked in the local boat, in the local fleet. And ironically nowadays, and really the focal point of that used to be, big tuna, like tuna over 100 pounds, 150 pounds. I mean, where are you going to see a wide open bite of tuna over 150 pounds, based out of San Diego within 100 miles or so in, 1985, 86, maybe the odd legendary big eye bite, what I mean? But other than that, there's no chance of that happening. You had to be long range fishing. You had to be a long range fisherman in order to have a crack at that, going down and fishing around the Revilla Quijedos or Clarion or Clipperton Island. Nowadays, hey man, you got that right out here. You got that, sometimes 30 miles offshore. I mean, those guys, I just marvel at it. Ryan Booger on the San Diego, those guys in the San Diego, it's like you look at them, they're backing in every once in a while. They've got a stern full of 120 to 170 pounders. They go, yeah, we had 150 pound bluefin on the corner for half an hour. Guys using 40 pound, getting blown up. Just how it's really. I got off on a tangent there, but it really is remarkable how what used to be so incredibly rare, or what identified long range fishing is just on the edge and there's nowhere else you could go. Well, there's a whole generation of kids now that they've done it, man. They've seen it wide open on 100 pounders, 150 pounders. I'll tell you, you'll love talking to me because I get off on these tangents, but at the same time, these guys, they've seen, probably 10 wide open bites on 100 pound bluefin over the last 5 years, but not one of them's ever seen an albacore caught. I mean, we got a whole generation of kids here who've never, not only they've not seen one caught, they've never even seen one.
Seen a live one, right?
Yeah. We had a trip a couple of years ago where we were fishing up north there, catching bluefin, and there's some little bluefin in the mix, just little random, 15 pounder swam through. Anyway, at the end of the trip, I was up at the top of the dock, and the processors were sorting some stuff out up there, and I look over, I'm like, hey, is anybody going to tell me about that albacore we caught? Everybody looks up, they're like, what? I go, yeah, that's an albacore laying there, man. They didn't even know what it was.
They didn't even know what it was.
They didn't know what it was. Nobody even said anything about it. Yeah, that whole group of guys, all the fish processors. I walked it back down to the boat and showed my guy. Brian was down there, Brian Sims. I held it up and went, hey, Brian, what's this? He goes, holy, that's albacore. Yeah, he's like, we got an albacore. All the other guys are looking at me like, huh? What is that?
What's wrong with that tuna?
What
is wrong with that?
Yeah.
Funny looking yellowfin, man. Look at those fins.
Oh my gosh. The story goes on too about that. But anyway.
Well, I think we're jumping around, and I know, and we're not staying focused. I have the same problem. You come to one of my seminars, you'd be blown away. So all someone has to do is ask me a question, and we're gone. We forgot what we were there for. I've had people come up and go, Dave, weren't you supposed to talk about bluefin? I said, oh, yeah, I guess the seminar's over. I'm sorry. We've been talking about sea lions for the last 3 hours. Sorry. But you've been around for a long time. And we're jumping way ahead. We shouldn't be there right now. But don't you think right now the ocean's healthier than in Southern California than we've ever seen it before?
I 100% agree that this is, this is probably the best example of a healthy ecosystem. It's not just the bluefin; it's everything else. The marine mammals, the forage, the layered forage. I mean, it's not just fin bait; it's everything else. It's the squid. It's the smaller stuff, the plankton. I mean, it is. What it amazes me about this Southern California bite here is how, and it's an indication of what we're talking about. It is a magnet, and has been for 10, 12, 14 years now. It's a magnet for like every fish in the Eastern Pacific Ocean. They seem to just shoom every year now. They come right here. The biggest change that I've seen in the long range fishery is, our summertime would start down there in the 28-degree latitude, the 27, the 28. Then we'd follow the fish up to 29, the 30, the 31. And then, come August, September, we'd be up here, maybe rubbing elbows with some of the local guys. But it was almost every year if not a predictable, it was a traceable progression, as the fish would work their way up the coast. And the last a lot of years now, I mean, we're talking, 7, 8, 10 years now, the progression, it never starts down south. It's just all of a sudden the fish are just here. The bluefin, they've had the last 4 or 5 years, they've had a pretty consistent pattern where they go down into that 29 block in the wintertime, and hang around above Benitez, around that area. Then they'll come up. But the yellowfin, the yellowtail, the dorado, those things, they just, I mean, they obviously come through there, but they don't spend any time. They don't dilly-dally around. I mean, they just bomb it right for this Southern California bite. And again, as an example of just how healthy this whole ecosystem is here. It starts obviously with at the bottom of the food chain, the forage fish, and they've got plenty to eat. Next thing you know, between the water conditions and everything else that wants to be here and pull up to the buffet, it's got to be the explanation for it. I mean, I know the water's nice, but it's got to be some good eating for them to be coming around here like they do.
You and I talked a couple weeks ago. We were talking, and I was talking to you about the yellowfin, and you're like, "Well, I just came back from I don't even know, you were 10-day or 12-day, and you're like, I don't know where it's going to come from, Dave, because the water's really not warm down below there." And then look at Todd Manser called me 2 days ago and said, "Dave, 8 miles off of San Onofre, I saw more yellowfin than I've seen in 15 years in Dana Point." He's just like, "There's so much yellowfin here on the beach right now," and that stuff just material, like you said, it just boop, popped out of nowhere. You guys driving back and forth, you would have saw it.
100%. I mean, there's boats transiting between here and Alejos Rocks, between here and the Ridge, daytime going above the islands, and there's 250 miles. It's changing now, but there's 250 miles of 62 to 64 degree, off color. Some of it's okay, but none of it has any significant sign of fish. I mean, it's a friggin' graveyard. You drive through, there's nothing going on, no bird life, no fish, but it shows up here, and it was kind of the same thing this year. There's those early indicators. In May, a couple of guys got a yellowfin mixed in with those schools of bluefin. There's an odd one here and there. Those, every year that's happened, that's been the dead ringer. It's already here. Here. It's down there swimming around with them, I don't know, cutting a low profile, doing whatever the hell they do, but they're already here. Or those vanguards where, they're the indicators that there's going to be a hell of a lot more that show up, unannounced or just, with a small announcement, if you will. There's actually a lot more. The guys down below saw a pretty good wave of it. So I would not be surprised. in the next, 2-3 weeks to see a real influx. And I know there's a lot around now, but I think that there's a big time wave of it coming. That fish that's all mixed up, anywhere from those little dudes, they show up, those 8-10 pounders, all the way up to that beautiful school grade, that like the perfect recreational fish for Southern California is like the 15 to 18 pound yellowfin tuna. They pull like a devil, but you can catch them. They bite. They don't wear everybody out. They don't break tackle. It's kind of the perfect fish to satisfy everybody.
Yeah, it's good for the private boaters because they like to eat the lures behind the boat too.
Exactly.
So very simple. I've been talking about it for a couple weeks on my game plans I put out. That get ready because the whole world's about to change. I was predicting the middle of July, and I was pretty spot on. I started talking about it last year. I said, "You watch." But the amount of flats, and you and I know what those are, but the people that are watching don't know that Dorado that showed up last year. Like, you and I have never seen that before. I mean, my dad can tell you he never saw that before. Half day boat getting 150, 200 Dorado every day.
Half day boats.
Every day.
I'll let you in on another piece of Southern California sport fishing history. I dubbed those things flats. That was my that was my term.
Okay.
I started calling them flats back in, I mean, it was like in the early 90s, man. It caught like wildfire. Now those things are flats. That's what they are.
Yeah, that's what everybody calls them in the industry. We got a good hit on the flats today, and people are like, "Oh, you're on the Huntington Flats?" No, no, no. The fish,
Yeah.
the Dorado.
Every time I hear that, I laugh. I'm like, yep, there you go.
So we're jumping all over the place, but we're back to what you started out, and then you went for Frank, and then that catapulted your professional. I mean, I know Eddie had a lot to do with it, but when Frank got a hold of you and found out who you were and what you were all about, and then what you have today, if we went through that, we would be on here for another 3 hours. But who you are right now, where you're at right now, that's a direct correlation to about Frank trusting you and letting you run the boat your first time when you were 21 years old. That's crazy. You think about the Royal Star. You handed the keys, you and Brian going, here, kid, 19-year-old, 20-year-old kid, here, go take it for a ride.
Yeah, take it for a 5-day. take it for a 7-day. Take it for a 17-day, you know, at 22. But you know,
this is Tim's boat, guys. So those of you that don't know, I'm throwing it up there. That's Tim, Brian, and Randy's boat right there. Randy's still part of it, right?
Yeah, he is. And then we have a new partner in the boat also, Alex Natipadab. He's just an incredible addition to our ownership team. He also is operating the boat, you know, at least a quarter, if not a third of the time. Just a remarkably capable young guy that I've actually I've had my eye on him for a few years. You know, he worked on a boat called the Apollo for a long time. He ran that boat and just did a great job of it. He really, in my eyes, and again, I was watching him close, he really set himself apart from everybody else in his ability to keep that thing running, you know, and especially when they had a few, you know, specialty trips. They took the boat to Costa Rica and et cetera. And the fact that he was able to pull that off and, you know, it really just identified him as a cut above. So we had him join the boat as an operator. Was it 2 years ago? I think it was 2 years ago. And he came with the intent of him buying some of Randy's shares, which Randy was more than happy to offer him. So he's just a tremendous addition. I mean, he really is he's the future of the boat. Not that I'm going anywhere anytime soon. I'm 55 years old. You know, I'm far from over the hill, and Brian is the same way. But Alex is definitely, you know, I call him a kid. He's 33 years old. He's got the youthful vigor and drive where, you know, he's going to be the future of the boat, you know, beyond our tenure, if you will.
Right. Now, this is your partner, Brian.
Loving it. We just came back from an absolutely unbelievable trip. Rock cod Ricky proved himself to be a yellowfin killer as well. Very blessed with good fishing, great fishing in fact, on giant fish up to 340 pounds, and we just about filled the boat, but we got to do it all, best of all, in flat, calm weather. Gotta love it.
And Tuesday.
Look at those fish on the back of the boat. We were talking in the beginning of the show. You had to go on a trip like that to catch that kind of fish. And now, like you were saying, Booger comes in on the boat, leaves in the morning at 5 o'clock in the morning, gets back at dark, and their boat looks like the back of that, like Brian's trip right there. It's pretty wild.
I know.
How did you, Brian, and Randy all get together and become partners? Because that's kind of this industry is gnarly, gang. You got to understand this industry is gnarly. It's cutthroat. Plus, we're all super tired, and we all got our edge, and we all got our egos. To have three guys that are motivated like you guys are to stay together as long as you had to be a pretty special deal.
Yeah, you know, Randy ran the XL for Bill Poole and he kind of got thrown he got thrown to the wolves, you know, and they launched the boat, and you know, it was a tumultuous event, you know, and the original operator, you know, had some demons, et cetera, whatever. And Randy, he was kind of like I was. I think he was 22 or 23. And it was like, here you go, kid. You know, you're it. And he ran that boat. He was the guy on there for, at least 4 years, 3, 4, 5 years. I think it was 4 years that he ran it, because he was on the 105 before that, the qualifier 105. And he and I were, it really was. I mean, it was a much smaller pool and much tighter knit. And he and I were, we were the new kids, still wet behind the ears, and the old guys didn't exactly embrace us, or make it easy on us. We had to earn our stripes, if you will. So needless to say, we gravitated towards one another. I mean, we became a force out there as far as fishing goes and information, because like I said, the older guys, they didn't try to backstab us or anything, but they didn't make anything easier on us. So we formed our own alliance. And like I said, we were a hell of a team. I was running Royal Polaris at the time. And then when I had an opportunity to take over Royal Star 100% as the captain operator, run the whole show for Frank. He still owned the boat in 1992. So I switched over to Royal Star, and that's when Randy and I really became tight. He was running that XL. I was on Royal Star. And again, we were a hell of a team working together to, run successful trips and evolve we really did a lot to evolve the industry and shifting the focus from just a quantity pursuit to quality, the biggest fish possible, and focusing on that biggest, not just the biggest, but the biggest variety, infusing that variety into the trip rather than just stay in one place and catch them until the cows come home. We were the guys that went, hey, look, we got enough of those. Let's go somewhere else and try for something different. But we did a really good job of partnering up, if you will, on the fishing side of it. When an opportunity came along to buy the boat, Frank offered the boat to me in 1996. I immediately went to Randy and said, hey man, we're pretty much already working together as far as fishing goes. Let's form a partnership here. And that way we'll have, it was in concept, it provided epic work-life balance, because at the time, man, we were on the boat all the time. We were the guys. We ran the boat, hundreds of days a year. We were out there. Of course, we loved it, but you gotta have a little bit of time to recuperate and to stay on your best game. Anyway, that was the foundation of it. One guy was always on a boat to watch the business. One guy was always on the beach to watch the business. And the rest is history. That was in 1996. We bought Royal Star. We actually leased it for 3 years from Frank before we went to we established credit, established payment history. And then we went to the bank in 1999 and actually secured a loan ourselves. What was I at the time? 98. I think I was 28 at the time, 28, 29. And I think I was 28. Randy was 29 when we bought that boat. And then, excuse me, Brian actually worked for us. He worked for me when I ran Royal Star back in the early 90s, 90, 92. I think he started in 93, 4, 5, 6. He worked with us for 4 or 5 years. And then he had an opportunity. Actually, we made an opportunity for him to jump off our boat and go take over the qualifier 105. Great chance for him to go out and get experience, run the whole show, do it himself, which he did for 6 years. He was really successful over there, built a strong reputation for himself. And at that time, it was around 2005, 2006. Randy he's really successful in lobster fishing also. So his time was it was getting run pretty ragged. He wanted to get some more time to focus on that side of his fishing. We recruited Brian off the boat to come back and join us as an owner. And, here we are, it's 2023. We've always been compatible. We have really similar, we're obviously very different people, but philosophically we're very, very closely aligned. Our concept of the business of the boat, how we operate our boat, we're closely aligned. It's certainly the foundation for a really successful partnership. We've like anything, there's peaks and valleys, but I can say with 100% confidence, we've had very, very few valleys, very few, and they have not been deep ones. They've been pretty shallow valleys that we've been able to work through whatever challenges have manifested. Along the way, along the way, and again, this is through my association with Frank, who I cannot again overemphasize my number one, my gratitude to him, because he really, you know, Frank never gave me anything. What he did provide was a platform for me to do my thing, if you will, and be successful. He gave me plenty of rope, if you will, and sink or swim. Unfortunately, that a lot of things went right, and I've been able to take advantage of these opportunities that have come along. As Frank, as he's a really successful guy, of course, owning Royal Polaris, Fisherman's Landing, owns part of Point Loma Landing, Seaforth Landing, etc. He's taken advantage of an awful lot of ownership opportunities that have come along because he's positioned himself well. I've done my best to follow in his footsteps because, why wouldn't you? I mean, the guy's just an incredible example of success through pure effort. I mean, the guy is about the hardest worker you could ever imagine, and everything that has become available to him has become available through his hard efforts. So anyway, I've tried to follow the same pattern, and he's been really instrumental in that also. When an opportunity comes along, it's I'm just about the first guy he calls. Hey, here's an opportunity to buy a percentage of the landing. Are you interested? Heck yeah, I'm interested. And same thing when we started Fisherman's Processing. Frank, Randy, Sean Sebring, and I started Fisherman's Processing back in 2010. There was a with this, the whole, once the fleet really started switching over and everybody embraced the whole RSW thing, which is a whole nother conversation. But once everybody started embracing the whole RSW thing and bringing in their catch fresh, and there was expanded the demand for processing tenfold. There was obviously there was a real need for more capacity in the fish processing side, which is why we started Fisherman's Processing. And that brings us to now. That was in 2010 that we started Fisherman's Processing, and now 2023, it's it's doing great, going strong. We're up against another change that's only going to make us that much better, that much stronger coming up here in December. But that's kind of the abridged version, of my history. And
hold on 1 second. Let me show everybody this Fisherman's We'll just do a real quick clip, and then we'll keep going talking about it some more.
Okay.
How many people are working in there? There's a bunch of people cutting fish.
Yeah, at our peak, we have north of 25 total employees back there between the cutting table, vacuuming, packing boxes, packing coolers, getting rid of or shifting the waste around, making sure that it gets in the cooler. I mean, it's quite a process, and especially in those days when multiple boats get in, there can be a lot of product. I know it always, it looks like a tremendous pile of fish, and it is, but you divide it out among 60 people, even if they have 10 fish apiece, 60 people, that's still, that's 600 fish. I mean, it's a lot of fish combined. So it's, it really has to be efficient and effective in order to process that much fish. Ideally, one of my I'll take you back a little bit from the fish processing side. When I was a young guy in the boats, one of the things that always used to just drive me nuts about long range fishing was the whole program the day the boat got in, and that was the offloading of the boat. We'd throw because we always froze the fish in brine, and if your viewers don't know what brine freezing fish is, you put water in the tank and you add a bunch of salt to it, then you refrigerate that water and you bring the temperature below freezing, way below freezing, because the salinity content. So, you have a free flowing solution that's, say, at 10 degrees, 20% salinity. So all the fish are frozen like bricks when they come out of there. Take them, in the case of the bigger fish, if you leave it laying in a cooler, it would take, 2-3 days for that thing to thaw, because we're unloading it at a 10 degree backbone temperature, and not an ideal product. You got to thaw it, then fillet it, and then refreeze it. Once you process it, it was, I'll label it okay. I'll be generous. It was
Right.
okay, you know what I mean? But it wasn't great. One of the things that, you know, when I was young, used to always just drive me nuts that, you know, the boat would get in and we'd pitch the fish off into the carts, and then all that fish would go up to the top of the sidewalk and it would get sorted out there. And it was I mean, it was drudgery, man. You know, the anglers are up there with their hooks and their boots and dragging fish around and putting them on their numbers and getting them back into a cart and figuring out. And you know, for so many years, I would just sit there and go, God, there's got to be a better way to do this. You know what I mean? Like this is just, it's just
It was horrible.
It's
It was horrible. Remember Albacore? Oh my gosh, that was like, you don't even understand. Albacore, there was no limit. We could have 20 fish per person, and there would be big piles of mush up there. Come on, you remember?
Oh yeah, I remember like yesterday. It just drove me crazy, man.
Yeah, you're the reason why it's not like that.
You know, so you know the concept. I always was looking for a concept to offer anglers the option of not having to touch their fish, having a processing venue that was there, that the fish would come directly off the boat and go right to them and go right to the shop, and ideally provide the anglers the opportunity to have their fish processed that same day, even, you know, to be able to walk out the door with their product in hand at the end of a successful trip. So, you know, it went hand in hand with the whole RSW thing. When we figured out how to hold the fish in beautiful fresh condition versus freezing it, you know, we realized that we had the ability to do that, and then we perfected the application and introduced it. That opened the door to provide that exact service, because the fish, when they come out of that RSW tank, you know, we pump that tank down to the dock. The fish never even come out onto the deck. We don't want them laying around. We want to handle them as little as possible, because they're delicate, you know, they're fresh. So, you know, that opened the door to them not going into carts, not going to the top of the dock. You know, ideally the service was okay, you know, and the system we use on the boat now, I don't know if you know this or not. We've been doing this for a number of years, you know, north of 15 years now. But every fish that an angler catches, we have a board out there, you know, on the bait tank, and every fish an angler catches, that, you know, we tag them with a tag corresponding to their number that's assigned to them, and then that fish goes in the hatch. And when it does, we record in a column the species of the fish next to that angler's number. So at all times during the trip, an angler can reference that list at any time and go, oh, look, I've got, you know, 3 bluefin in there, 5 yellowtail, etc. We know exactly what's in the hatch, and the angler also knows. So at the end of the trip, before we even get in, their processing order is already done. It's already completed. They already know, they fill out the form. I've got 3 of this, and I want to fillet it, etc. And that expedites the whole process. When we get in, you know, the processors, we hand them the forms, and it's already the angler. Hey man, he picks his tackle box up and his duffel bag and his rods, and he's gone. He's out the door. He's rolling for the house, or, you know, he comes back later to pick it up, or he, you know, goes and has breakfast and comes and picks it up a few hours later. It really, that process, you know, the whole RSW concept opened the door to, I mean, it was like, it wasn't just a you know, an incremental advance. I mean, that was a quantum leap in the level of the standard of service, number one, the quality of the product. I mean, everything, how that elevated the whole experience and added huge value to a long range trip. You know, I mean, it just transformed it. As far as I'm concerned, you know, anglers are, you know, they used to go out and the fishing was epic, of course, but then, you know, the frozen fish was kind of a byproduct you had to deal with. Whereas now the fishing is epic and the product is absolutely phenomenal. You know, the kind of care that we take a lot of pride in producing that premium quality product. We don't bang the fish around. We bleed them. We spike them. We do the Taniguchi method with the running the wire down the spine. We remove the innards. So that product, when it's offloaded, is, you know, I mean, it's as good as good gets. It's the equivalent of whatever, name some famous Nobu, sushi mark, sushi. It's as good as is being served there and better. And, you think again of the value plus that's tacked on to a long range trip. I mean, it's hard to measure it in dollars. Of course, it depends on if you're somebody who appreciates fish or appreciates sharing it, the spoils of your exploits. But regardless, it just adds a whole nother component to a trip that wasn't there before.
Now, we got a lot of people watching in Florida and Texas and stuff. You guys, what Tim's trying to explain here to you, because Tim runs the long range fishing. He's been doing it since he was 19 years old, long range. And we're talking about going out for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. What's the longest trip you've done?
That's exactly right. I should make mention of that, right?
Right.
Yeah. So our trips on the shorter end were 3 days. And on the longer end, we're north of 15 days, sometimes up to 17 days. We've got a couple of trips that are 15 days now. Our average trip is like 4 to 7 days. We run, a half a dozen or what do we have, 4 10-day trips in the wintertime and a couple of the longer ones. But the majority of the trips are 7 days. So, excuse me, all of the fish that our anglers catch. And when we're fishing in Mexico, the limits are really generous. You can keep up to 30 fish total, 15 of any one species, no more than 15 of any one species. So all of the fish when an angler catches it, that fish belongs to the angler. And when a fish is caught, we have big tanks that are below decks, just to give you a proportion size. 2 of our tanks hold 1,400 gallons of water. The other one holds 1,800 gallons of water. So that corresponds to about, if you're talking about tuna that are 40 pounds, that corresponds to about 100 of them, roughly, maybe a few more, depends on how they stack in there. But, those tanks, they'll hold, 2.5, 3.5 tons of fish, just depending on what size the fish are. It's a lot. And what we do is we fill those tanks full of seawater, just regular seawater. And we refrigerate that water. We run it through a chiller core. We refrigerate that seawater down to 30 degrees. And you think, well, 30 degrees is below freezing. It's not. Seawater doesn't freeze until 28 because of the salinity, because of the salt content. So we actually have a circulating seawater that's at 30 degrees, 31 degrees. And then when the angler catches the fish, we mark it for them. We bleed it. We'll remove the innards if it's a nice sized tuna, and then that fish it goes down into that hatch where it's immersed in that 30, 31 degree, 32 degree seawater for the duration of the trip. RSW product industry standard in commercial fishing was up to 2 weeks in RSW. We've held fish for 2 weeks on Clipperton trips, and it's been absolutely beautiful. The key, of course, is that you have to maintain that 30, 31. You can't let that temperature fluctuate too much. You can't let it get up north of 34, 30 feet. You got to maintain it down there in that 30, 31, 32 at the most in order to get that kind of time in the tanks. But again, most of our trips, they don't push up against that because we're in the, like a 15-day trip now, the anglers are actually on the boat 12 days. We'll drop off where you are in Cabo San Lucas on the 12th day and motor home. Usually the fish are on the boat maximum like 10 days. But for these trips that are less, out of San Diego, 3, 4, 7 days, 8-day trip, the fish is typically in the tank for, 4, 5, 6 days at the most. Absolutely perfect. Just makes the most beautiful premium product, because it's like, not only do you have this extreme care that we put into making sure the fish doesn't get banged around or bruised or abused when we're actually in the process of marking it and putting it in the hatch, but then it just sits there in that relaxed state. Now the tank is completely full of water right to the hatch, and then we put the hatch on and dog it. There's no free surface in the tank whatsoever. As you can imagine that if there was any free surface in there at all, the boat rolls around, it would just turn into soup in that tank. It would destroy everything. It would scrape the skin off. It'd be just a mess. But as long as there's no free surface whatsoever, water comes all the way to the top. And what we do when you put a fish in the hatch, tank's full of water, so it displaces water. Water actually comes out every time you put a fish in, and the last fish that goes in there, we dog that hatch on there, so it's rock solid. You know, that there's absolutely zero free surface whatsoever. So that fish just kind of sits in flux in that tank all trip. Just, you know, I'd say nice and warm and cozy, but it's the opposite. Nice and cold and, you know, protected. Doesn't get banged around, doesn't get bruised up, doesn't get thrashed. And, you know, and at the end of the trip, when we offload it, I was mentioning, you know, then we'll pump the water out of the tank, and we remove them out of there one at a time. They go right on a scale, they get weighed, weight and species are recorded, and then they go directly into a tote that's staged alongside the dock. And that tote, you know, once it's full, it goes right to the processing facility, which, you know, that's the best possible thing for that product. It is the less it's handled, the better it is. And, you know, it's certainly better for the angler, because, man, they don't have to touch it. You know, going back to the old archaic way of doing things. I mean, you talk about a drag, literally. Remember at the end of the trip, you'd have to go up there and, you know, if you got 40, there's a big pile of fish and you're sorting around, you know, grabbing the, you know, looking for your number and dragging it down on the sidewalk and putting it, you know, repeat the process again and again. It was a real primitive way of doing it. You know, in retrospect, you just can't even believe it. You know, it's like, you can't believe we used to do it that way. But then again, you know, cavemen used to walk around with clubs too. So, you know.
Right. You and Randy, though, you guys came up with this RSW thing. You guys were the designers of this. You must have sat up in the wheelhouse for years trying to figure out how to do this, right?
I'm going to tell you, I mean, I was the guy.
Right. I know that, but people don't.
So it came about, you know, we took the boat down to Panama for two different years. There was a dust up down in Mexico with the Revillagigedos being closed down, and et cetera. And we were looking to expand, you know, beyond looking to develop a new winter fishery. So we took the boat down to Panama, and the water down there is incredibly warm. You know, it was north of 80 degrees, 82, 84. And yellowfin tuna, any tuna, but yellowfin in particular, you know, their body temp is generally 2 or 3 degrees warmer than the ambient water temp. So they're super hot. They come out of the water. Our original plan down there, Dave, was that we were going to brine freeze those fish. We were going to get the brine super cold, so it would, you know, pull heat out of those fish as fast as possible. I mean, I had a super high salinity content, brine down as, you know, 5 below zero. I just thought that was the greatest idea in the world, right? So we dropped the first couple fish down there, pulled one out. We were going to fillet it at the end of the day. You know, we left it in there 6-8 hours, whatever it was. Pulled it out, we filleted it, and man, it was horrible. It was jello. I mean, it was completely, It was cooked, right? We put it down in that tank full of -5 brine. You know, it was like raining over it, trickling over it, and it froze like the outside inch, which insulated all that heat in that fish in the body, and it literally cooked from the.
Yeah.
It was like,
wow.
It was like jello, and the thing was just absolutely ruined. So, you know, I right away pivoted. It was like, well, that's not going to work. And we used to flood our wells. It's amazing that it didn't dawn on me, you know, prior to the whole Panama experience. But because we used to flood our wells when we would get a whole lot of fish. You know, we originally, with the brine freezing, we'd put a little bit of water in the bottom, and it would rain out of the top of the you know, the plumbing. We had holes cut in the plumbing, and suck it out of the bottom, and then force it to the top, you know, pump it to the top, and it rain down, trickle through the fish, pulling heat. Well, when we got a whole lot, like say we'd catch, you know, 300 fish in a stop or whatever, we would fill the tank full of water, because it's so much more efficient at pulling heat, you know. Well, that's all we did with the RSW thing. You know, I was like, well, for sure, number one, we have to remove the innards. You got to gill and gut them, and we have to flood the tank, because that's going to pull heat, you know, more efficiently. So, and I could really get into the weeds here, but obviously, you know, I told you I was a chief engineer before I was a captain, and I have a pretty good working knowledge, very good of refrigeration systems, how they work, and I knew I could get, because of the particulars of our refrigeration system on Royal Star, which we've really adapted, you know, now more so than we had it. But I knew we'd be able to get our tanks down to that certain range and maintain them at that temperature. So the first load of fish that we brought in, we offloaded in Panama at a dock that was adjacent. We used like a yacht marina to offload anglers and their gear, and then we would motor over to a more commercial port to offload the fish and the boxes, because we would send everybody home with boxes of fillets. We had to pull the fish out and fillet them. We didn't want to do that in the yachty harbor. So anyway, when we're offloading this fish and we're cutting a couple of them up, and it just so happened that a couple of fish buyers, these guys were from Miami, came by, and we started shooting the breeze. And guy asked me, he's like, hey, how much are you guys selling those for? And I told him, no, they're not for sale. I explained what we did, and he was just marveling at the quality of it. And he said, we had a couple big ones down at the bottom of the tank, whole ones. He said, do you mind if I core one of those? We had the whole thing, you take the core sample of the fish, and he says, do you mind if I core one? I said, yeah, go ahead, man, check it out. And jumps down in there, take this core. He comes up. We had one of those, white cutting boards. So he laid the thing out, and he's talking to his buddy, and they're like, excitedly whispering, and like doing their, rubbing the oil and he goes, you're sure you guys don't want to sell this? And I said, yeah, they're not ours. They belong to somebody, but I was like, well, is it good? Tell me, man, because this is the first time we've done this with this RSW. And the guy said, this is the best fish I've seen in here all year. He says, I can't believe this. This is unbelievable. And
wow.
I literally stopped what I was doing. I put down my knife, and I went up. Randy was up top. I said, dude, the world as we know it has just changed. I said, and this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. I said, everything from here on out, we're going to RSW. We're going to transform this entire industry. This is it. This is the moment that we've been waiting for. And, Randy's great, of course. He's like, hey man, knock yourself out, right on, whatever we need to do to make it happen. I'm here, and he's really good at logistics, So like the logistics side, when we worked to set up a processor that was capable of handling it, we launched the idea together, and it's the old going back to our partnership. This is the same with Randy, Brian, and I. It's like we all, we're all quick to, hey man, whichever one has the idea, whatever it may be, it's like, hey, go with it, and whatever role you're in, whether you're taking the lead or you're a support role, just do whatever it takes to make it happen. That's the story of it. And we did, we came back up from there. It was in 2003. We came back up from there, and I made a big to-do about it. It's like, hey, this is how we're going to do it on Royal Star, RSW, beautiful fresh fish. We had a new processor set up to handle it. It was 5-star at the time. And, it just went off like a bomb. It for the obvious reason. The quality of the product, it just blew everybody away. And as you can imagine, people are resistant to change. We all are, naturally. And we took some real flack from some of our colleagues back in the day, because they were pissed. They were pissed that, because it does require a lot more from the crew. It's a lot more work, man. There's a lot of labor involved in it, when it comes to dressing the fish and all that. But it's just, we knew it was so worth it, because we already knew what the result was, as far as the quality of the product, and we knew that our anglers were just going to be blown away by it. When we introduced it to albacore, yellowtail, bluefin, all that. Something of all of the fish that we catch, and everything has been, turned into gold from the RSW application. But of all the fish, the fish that it transformed the most was a yellowtail, believe it or not. What a good yellowtail is, when you spike it and you bleed it, and man, that thing sits in that RSW for a few days. Yellowtail used to be a second-class citizen. It'd be like, oh yeah, we got some yellowtail. Oh, they're good smoked, like kind of that, like they really weren't, or they're good on the barbecue with a lot of lemon. You know what I mean? It's like not anymore, man. Those things are, I am not kidding you, Dave. They are gourmet out of that RSW. It's unbelievable what a transformation that fish went through. I mean, just this delicate, just beautiful, just the flavor of the fish alone, but how versatile it is, and et cetera, et cetera. I'm not a chef, bon vivant, but I know that fish is just been absolutely transformed by that process.
Yeah, the meat blossoms, if you will. It just blossoms. It just is it's better product than anything we could ever comprehend, because it just, when it sits in there for that amount of time, something happens magical to the meat and it just blossoms.
Yeah, I think it's that, it just relaxes. Everything relaxes in there. It's just like curing meat or anything else. It just has sufficient time to relax. And it really is. There's a texture thing, it's just that melt in your mouth. I mean, it really is you can tell I still, I mean, this is 20 years later now. This is in 2003 that we figured this out. And I still, man, I get excited about it. It's a huge point of pride for me to know that long after I'm gone, and while I'm here, I mean, I think you're really fortunate as a human to be able to leave your mark on something that really improves it for everybody across the board. You know what I mean?
Oh,
And,
absolutely.
I mean, this is my mark, and I'm not saying I'm done. There may be something else that comes along, but at the very least, I know that there isn't a. I was talking with Robbie Gant from AFCO the other day. We were talking about the new. I think they call it the tripwire. They've got a product now they developed for running the cord down the tuna spine. But we were talking about exactly that. I mean, and this is now gone from Royal Star, from the origins of that day or that trip in Panama, and it's across the board. Every long range boat, every overnight boat, every half day boat, and even that now the private boats, the yachts, like everybody is on board now with this premium quality care of the fish, recognizing that that product is valuable, man. And it also, to me, it really validates the effort that we put towards, harvesting these fish, because that's what it is. It's a harvest. And, the appreciation for the fact that every one of these things is, it's valuable, man. It's valuable as it's valuable as a food source. But it's also valuable, man. It's a critter that's, this thing was swimming around in the water. If you're going to take it, you should take responsibility for it and show it the appropriate level of care to make it something, special at the most, or worthwhile at the least. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, the thing I wanted to ask you about this RSW thing was the albacore. I remember coming down there, going fishing, 6-7 day trip, and coming down there and getting my fish off the boat and putting it in the back of the truck and going home, and they are popsicles. And by the time they thawed out, the outer meat was like mush. When you went to rip the skin off or do whatever we did back in those days, the fish itself was pretty much garbage when it was popsicled, and then wait, like you said, 2 or 3 days for it just to thaw out so we could cut it. Because I was working on boats, and we would come down there and do that, and that was our vacation. And then we'd get home, and with our truckload of friggin' fish in our backyard, it was the biggest mess in the world. You revolutionized the whole world for even us in the industry. It just changed everything.
Yeah, those albacore, and we were really fortunate, because when we did introduce the RSW thing, we were right smack in the middle of that incredible albacore cycle.
Right.
So we got to put those to the test immediately. And, albacore are really delicate compared to a bluefin tuna or yellowfin tuna. Those things are hard, they're durable. Whereas an albacore, they're very delicate. Their skin's delicate. There's their overall, their makeup is just, it's just soft. They're a soft fish. But you hold them in that RSW for, and again, the key is that 30 to 31 temperature range. And man, they come out of that tank and they're not frozen, but they're firm. You know what I mean? Like they've got that integrity. They're not like rubbery when you pull them out of there. They're just nice and firm. And Oh, you talk about quality. Holy smokes. I mean, it's just absolutely beautiful, especially if you bleed them, you do it right. God, what a beautiful product. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I wish we could see that fish again because, like you said, the kids today don't even know what it is, and if you could see it in the RSW, they would never experience what we would experience. Remember unloading those things, Tim, throwing them in the cart, and the tails would rip off, and it was just a on the half day, or excuse me, on the day and a half or the 1 day boats. We didn't have anything like what you guys had. We didn't have the popsicle makers. We didn't have any of that stuff. Sat in the gunny sack, then it went in the fish hold with ice, and if the stuff wasn't on the top or wasn't in the middle or something, it was just mush. It was a horrible way to treat fish. And like you say, you have most respect. I love what you always say about you have respect for each and every one of those fish. We didn't have that when we were growing up. It just wasn't there. It wasn't what we were taught by the old timers. It just wasn't. We were just taught get them in the boat, get them in there, get them in the ice, and get them to the people and get out of here. Crazy, right?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I like to, again, I don't want to, it's not that I'm it's not that I'm not hey, I mean, I pursue them as hard as anything else. And I love catching them. And that's why, going back to the beginning, I said, that's why I've done this, is because I'm a fisherman at heart. But at the same time, for me, Dave, it's not like something that I hear people say. I'll say, we went out, we killed 8, today, or we really killed them, or I love to kill fish, and it's like, for me, the joy is not in the killing of something. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm not after the kill. I love the capture. I love the pursuit, and the killing is that's like a necessary evil, if you will, because I like harvesting it. I like the product. So it's like, sorry, bud, but you got to go. But I'm not turned on by the bloodlust. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a little different world today than what we grew up when we were kids. It's
Yeah, we didn't know any better.
right. That was how we were taught by the old timers that taught us. Okay, I know we've gone way over an hour. Tim and I could sit here and talk forever. We want to talk a little bit about your boat, a little bit about what you do. We're gonna run over a little bit. We lost a lot of the guys watch this show live. Tim, we'll get a whole bunch of people watching it after, but a lot of guys had to go back to work. We lost about half our audience because they watch it for that hour at lunchtime every day. But we're going to keep going here for a little bit longer. If you have the time to talk about your boat for a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
So the Royal Star, what happened? Where did it come from? Because I know, but people watching don't know that this is a huge boat. This is a giant boat.
Well, it's all relative. I mean, in the world of long range fishing, it's like a medium size, I would call it, a long range fishing boat. But I actually, coming from Royal Polaris, which is one of the biggest boats, and then when I moved, I'll say I graduated to Royal Star when I took it over myself. I actually was introduced in pretty short order to the versatility of it. To me, it's the perfect size. You can do just about anything with it, man. I mean, you could tuck back into a cove and fish sea bass with that thing, or you can go out 350 miles offshore or 500 miles offshore at Hurricane Bank and fish big yellowfin and weather. You can do anything and everything in between. So it's a really versatile boat. It's really well designed. It's considered a sister ship to there's 3 boats like Royal Star, just the hull specs, if you will, the American Angler, Polaris Supreme, and Royal Star. But Royal Star has a bunch of unique integral features. It was built by Ted Dunn, who was a commercial fisherman who he partnered with Frank on Royal Star, and I think Ted intended on spending quite a bit of time on Royal Star because he added a lot of features that really set that boat apart. An internal stabilizing system, the integral construction, the framing, the hull material. How that boat is built. It's just a tank compared to anything else that's out on the water. So it's very, very specifically designed for what we do. And one thing I can say about Royal Star, and this is, again, it goes back to our philosophy, meaning Brandy, Brian, and I, but a boat shouldn't get worse as it gets older. It should get better. And in the case of Royal Star, that boat's 10 times the boat today as it was in 1992 when I started running it. You know, all of the systems that had, you know, the inevitable deficiencies that systems have. You know, people design those things in boat yards. You know, half of those guys, they don't practically apply those things. So, you know, hey, it looks good on paper, and then it doesn't really work all that good once you're out there, or it doesn't have the longevity. We have replaced, aside from just a couple things, we've replaced just about every system on that boat ourselves, applying our knowledge, our practical, you know, working skill set to the systems, the mechanical side of the boat, certainly the creature comforts. You know, we've made that boat a hell of a lot better. And you know, it would be hard with what we have to work with. It would really be difficult to make something better. I can say that for sure. You know, if I was starting from scratch, building a brand new boat, would I do a few things different? Yeah, I would, because you know, I know some things now. But again, taking that platform from where it was when I got on there in 1992 and for what it is today, we're proud of her for a reason. You know, we put 30 years, I've put 30 something years of blood, sweat, and tears into that thing. And, you know, it shows every day. You know, I walk around and, you know, I've got a little internal smile every time walking around going, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, we fixed that. Yeah, we got on top of that. Yeah. You know, every little thing, and they still pop up from time to time. And it's like, that hits the list, man. That's not going to be like that next year. I guarantee it. You know, we're going to do whatever we can to make that better, et cetera.
King, let me show you a little bit about Tim's boat real quick while we're got him here. Check out. Hold on. Finished it off looking at the staterooms there. How many of those bitchin' bedrooms do you have on the boat?
I had to don my hat here, man. Sun actually came out. We had a gray morning. So there are 10 staterooms altogether.
Okay.
Two man staterooms. There's 12. Sorry, the two upstairs. There's 12 staterooms altogether. Actually 13, but our cooks are they occupy one of them. So, but there are 12 staterooms that accommodate 2 anglers each. So our maximum number of anglers that we carry is 24. But many of our trips we carry less. You know, it just depends on if it's a charter group sometimes, or the longer trips we pare it down. The longer the trip, we pare down the load to 16, 18, 20. It just depends again on the length of the trip. And a lot of the charter group prefer to fish with a few less anglers at the rail. They'll cut it down to 20 or 18, which is incredibly comfortable, as you can imagine. That's a great number of anglers to fish with on that boat.
How long is the boat?
So she's 92 overall, and that's the tip of the anchor to the back rail. It's on the document, it's 82.6, and that's at the water line. So, you know, you got 90 feet of deck space up there.
And then how wide is it?
It's 92 by 25. On the document, it's 82 by 22.
And what's this picture? Where are you guys at? What are you doing?
That's my boy. That's my son Duke at he and I at Guadalupe Island back in, I want to say maybe 2008, something like that. I threw you a couple more pictures too of him present day. I think that we took on the last trip he was on back in July. So we get a look at the progression of time if you have those other pictures of him.
I have so many pictures. I don't know what they are of, but what's this picture of? That's big yellowfin.
Yeah, it's a big, beautiful yellowfin, and the guy, the angler, Martin, I'm trying to remember his last name. I would remember, but he's from Holland, so I couldn't pronounce his last name even when it was sitting in front of me. But that was a great catch. That catch was made, it was somewhere around the Tres Marias Islands, like maybe 3-4 years ago.
That picture of the salmon, is that your son?
No, that's me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was another one of my exploits. My brother and I told you he's in the fishing industry also, and he lived in Alaska for many years. We owned a couple salmon boats up in Alaska, so I spent a few months for about 7 or 8 years going up there and fishing salmon, fishing lingcod. In the summertime, I'd go up there and fish the openers with him. It was something cool to do, something different. Got to get my feet wet up north and fish for. I used to break those guys' balls all the time, call them cheese eaters. Used to fish for cheese eaters, but they're actually great fish, man. I had a ball up there.
This is a fish that I got to catch a couple of years ago in Florida. That looks like you're in Florida too, fishing in the canals there.
That's exactly where we were.
Pretty bitchin' little fish, huh?
Yeah, my son, he's quite the baseball player. We would go to tournaments back there in Florida, and he never failed to bring fishing rods. And that just so happened we were staying at Airbnb, and that was right off the back porch.
Nice. In that fish, I was blown away when I saw my first one right there. So easily accessible that we could go catch them in our backyard. We were using tilapia. Were you using bait or were you fishing lures?
That was top water there.
Okay.
A little like a Zara spook kind of thing. But those things are touchy. I've seen a hell of a lot of them back there. They're smart, man. They're not easy to catch. You'd think they'd just be super aggressive and eat everything, and they don't, man. They're clever.
You throw out a tilapia though, they'll eat it all day on the 40-pound boy.
I believe that.
Because I'm a bait guy. I'm like the guy that showed me the fish. He was like, Dave, do you want to fish with bait or do you want to fish with lures? I was like, there's bait? He goes, well, I'll throw net. I'll catch you some tilapia. I go, yeah, I want a bait fish. I don't want to get one of those. I want to go catch a whole bunch of these. But speaking of bait, that brings us back. That one video where you're looking at 400 scoops of bait. I talk about bait all the time on my podcast. I talk about it on my website. Bait, 400 scoops. Really? How long does it take you guys to load bait at the bait barge in San Diego? How long?
It's about, for a full load, obviously there's some moving if we got to go to different boxes and the like, but I mean, we can swing that on in an hour and 15 minutes. It goes pretty quick. Yeah. And then it's more than enough, needless to say, it's more than enough. If you're judicious in application, you've got more than enough bait for any trip, be it a 10-day, 12-day, 15-day. I mean, the vast majority of the trips we actually return with bait because, we like to just, we always try to keep at least one tank that we, as our reserve, we kind of rat hole that thing and keep it for the next trip in case there's bait issues back home. But yeah, I mean, we've got huge bait capacity. All three of those tanks that I was talking about, the ones we use for RSW, we either use them for bait or RSW. We can use them for anything. Typically what we do is we've got our 4 tanks on top on the deck. We've got 2 in the bow, and then we've got the 3 in the stern. We'll put bait in 2 of the 3, and then we'll start the one with the RSW. And then as soon as that tank is full of fish, or we use enough bait on top that we transfer the bait from one of the tanks below deck back up top, then we switch that other tank over and turn it into an RSW hold also until we, either reach the end of the trip or the tanks are full or, whatever happens to make us switch over to the next one.
And then think about this. The people are watching in Texas or Florida or something. They can't comprehend what we're talking about bait. We have a bait company in San Diego and in Dana Point that is like unbelievable. The Everingham Brothers Bait Company. The product that they bring us to fish with is absolutely incredible. Can you touch on that for just a few minutes, especially from the world you come from?
Yeah, I mean, for us, that really is, the signature of the Southern California style sport fishery. What differentiates this fishery from every other in the world is the live bait that we have access to there, and the live bait capacity. not only do we have a huge quantity of bait to put on the individual hooks, but we've got a surplus that's 50 times what we put on the hooks, and we use that bait to attract other fish in. We'll actually throw that bait over the side as chum to attract fish, to get them fired up and in a biting mood. I can't tell you what a difference that makes, certain species in particular, but that's again what differentiates our fishery from all others in the world. We'll roll in on a school of tuna, and if you've got just baits to throw out on the hook, okay, great. You throw your bait out there, and maybe one of those tuna will peel off, or you'll hook one or two, and then they just keep right on going. Well, we roll into that, and we've got 15, 18 anglers who throw baits out with hooks in them, and then we're throwing another 3 or 4 scoops or whatever quantity it takes to get the attention of the fish. All of a sudden, those tuna are swimming along, and they look up and there's sardines raining down on their head, shooting off in every direction. You can imagine what kind of reaction it elicits. They're ready to go, man. And they're fired up, and they want to know where it's coming from. So they go right to the source, and if you're doing it right, when you're chumming them, it's like feeding chickens walking across the yard. You sprinkle a little here, a little there, and pretty soon, once the boat's stopped and you're still hitting the same spot in the water and off the the downwind corner, all that fish is concentrated right there, to where that angler that has his bait on a hook, he can, he doesn't have to set it in the water and let it swim off a long way, man. He sets it in the water and bam, there's a fish right there. It hits it. And, in many cases, you actually see it happen, which is about the greatest thing on earth. But, that's the whole idea. And that again, it's what differentiates our fishery from many others. There's no other boats that are designed like ours are, that are designed with that kind of bait capacity. You mentioned Everingham Brothers, which is the premier live bait company in the world. There's no other that even compares. The level of sophistication in both the methods they use to capture and transfer the live bait onto their boats, as well as their facilities that they maintain, that they offload the live bait into, and then maintain actually what we call cure the bait out, because it gets, no matter what, it's somewhat traumatic for that fish to get caught and in a net, and then transferred to a tank, and then transferred back out to another tank. It takes a few days for it to settle down and get perfectly healthy again. But those receivers, we call them, they're basically a floating cage. The way they maintain them, how they've designed them, I mean, there's nothing else in the world that even compares. They're the world's premier live bait company, and they're actually, I mean, I've said it many times, they're not a partner per se. They're not, like business wise, we don't share the books. We're not partners, but they're our partners, because without them, we don't have a fishery, and without us, they don't have a fishery. So we're partners in the success of this fishery overall.
Right. It's a very symbiotic relationship with the bait companies. That they're an integral part of our whole operation. And when I got people that come from Texas or from Florida that come fishing with us, they want to spend time just looking at that receiver. Because in San Diego, it's about 1/8 of a mile long. If you lined both of them up together, it's a mind-boggling amount of real estate holding just our bait.
Yeah,
in San Diego Harbor.
There's got to be what I want to say. There's probably north of 200 or 250 different boxes, I think, total. I may be wrong on that number, but it's a lot.
Pretty close. It's got to be pretty damn close.
Somewhere in that neighborhood, it's a lot. And each one, when it's at capacity, will hold at least 50, 80 scoops of bait. So, but it's a big fleet of boats, and that's the magic of. And there are several other live bait companies too in Southern California, but Everingham is the biggest and most sophisticated, and their ability to maintain that supply of bait, because you've got a fleet of boats, 60 boats, 50 boats that are turning over every 3 days, every day and a half, nightly, half-day boats. I mean, there's, probably north of 30, 40 boats a day that are visiting that receiver, that are drawing from it. And again, in order to keep that ideal bait, where they have bait that's cured available, so it lives once you bring it out on your fishing trip, it's a hell of an art. It's not something to be certainly not something to be unappreciated, but it's not something to be underestimated either. The scope of that, the scope of that task, the scope of those combined tasks, again, maintaining that quality bait on that scale it's worthy, man. Those guys are really, they earn their respect as far as I'm concerned.
They're phenomenal fishermen. They're fishing every night. They're fishing every single night, gang. There's a bait boat out there every single night catching that bait.
Yep.
Because we're all coming to the barge in the morning. But we got another 150, 200 boats every morning sitting there, private boaters too, that want that. It's cool.
Right. That too. Exactly. I didn't even mention them. Yeah.
We're setting in a line that's eighth of a mile, half a mile long, boats sitting in line, waiting for the gold, waiting to get some of that gold put in our bait. We're not going out like in Florida. The thing about Florida or Texas, you guys can throw the net. We're not allowed to. It's against the law here in California. First of all, we can't do it. Second of all, we don't have those shallow areas to throw the net anyway. If you like Florida or Texas, they have those big flat areas where the water's 15 feet forever. We don't have that here on the West Coast. You can drive a half mile out and be in 1,000 feet of water, right?
Yeah, and even close to the beach, with the surf action but where the majority of that bait is, it doesn't get up in there shallow enough. A throw net, you're not going to be successful. You're just not. It's going to sink out. The instant that net hits the surface, they go straight down, and you'd be lucky to get one or two. So it's an essential that cannot be overemphasized, and it's an essential component of the success, and is obviously it's as important to the history of this fishery as the boats, the icons, the live bait is it's not secondary. It's right alongside as a primary contributor to the success and the history of this fishery.
Yeah, like I say all the time to my members, you guys aren't dragging around thousands of gallons of water up and down the coast because you want to drag thousands of gallons of water. It is necessary for this industry and for what we do. That live bait is it. It's it. The whole thing revolves around bait. The whole thing.
It does.
You and I talked about before the show. I'm so happy that I don't have to stress over that, because on top of all the other things you have to stress over, you also have to stress about your bait. Is my bait going to live? Is my bait going to live through the 5 temperature changes as I drive down there? And it's just so much to put into the whole thing. And then people ask me all the time, why are there so many boats waiting in line for bait? Why don't you just go catch your own? It's not like that. It's just not like that. It's not a thing that we can just go catch our own bait.
Yeah, it's just as simple as that. You just can't. Reliably, you can't. That's the other thing is that, the fact that you can roll up to a location that 99.9 days out of 100 has that bait on demand right there. Think of the time that saves. Think of the effort that saves, whether it's for the private boater, for the big boat. Could we go make our own bait? We could. And I can tell you we could, because we did when we were down in Panama. We brought a bait net. We brought a par net. We brought a skiff. We hired guys to go out with us, and help us make our sets and so on and so forth. But it was, we had the one year we had 5 trips down there. Twice it was a 3-day affair. We put 3 days between the trips for a reason. Things don't always go like you expect them to. Just drive out and set it and load up, man. Like, I can tell you that from personal experience. Sometimes it takes a few tries, a few swings at it, or you set the net out and you snag a damn tree, or whatever. There's a lot of things that can happen that you just don't even have to. You don't even have to factor into the equation with that bait sitting there in those boxes at the receivers.
Right. It's an incredible fishery. We're so blessed to be involved in this whole thing. Both of us growing up in the industry, there's just nothing like it. And at the level that you got to do it and the level I got to do it, it's incomprehensible. We try to pass the story on to our viewers as much as we possibly can. I'm so blessed that you were with us today and that you were able to share some of your experience with us. Last week or the week before, you were talking about And I'm gonna let you go, but you were talking about these knife jigs and how dangerous they are, and you were going to talk about that for a little bit. We were going to try to talk about it today. I know we've just talked about so much stuff, but your thought on this is so smart, and that I think you guys are going to implement. I think you guys talked about implementing on the boat. You don't need 900 hooks hanging off that thing, right?
Yeah, you don't. And I'm not at the forefront of this. I'm in the I'm in the mix, and there's a number of us as operators now that have just dropped the hammer on hanging the hooks off the top part of the jig. We really have not determined those hooks to be the reason we're catching fish. I mean, maybe 1 out of 20 or something like that. Maybe a top hook, has the thing, but the vast majority of the time, those top hooks, they're not in the fish. They're on the bottom hook. And what happens, especially this night fishing, because sometimes you catch them one at a time, but a lot of times when they hit you, they hit you. Everybody's got one on. It's crazy. And it's a 100-pounder, 120-pounder, and you land that thing, and then one of the guys or we go down to do our thing and spike that fish, and it's moving, and if you just even graze that sweet spot, it'll make it jump. There's a little jump almost every time, and sometimes you get it perfect, but regardless, you have a jig that's 8 inches long or 10 inches long, and it has those two just razor sharp hooks off the top of it, and it's flopping around. That thing, whips its head one time while you go to spike it, and the rest. And I know those things, they're merciless, man. I mean, I like almost every one of us now has either fished those damn hooks out of themselves, out of one of their crew members, out of somebody who walked by and inadvertently caught one in the Achilles heel. I mean, the list goes on. So, and me being one of them, and then a couple trips ago, one of my guys being one of them, and and everybody. I mean, the first night I was out on the last trip, somebody, SOS, hey man, you guys, I know you got some bolt cutters over there. Can I borrow them? My guys has a giant hook through his head. It's the same story every time. So, the moral of it is, don't use the top hooks anymore. We just have this is a matter of safety at this point. And nobody that I know of has been, gravely hurt, but dude, it's a matter of time before somebody really gets jacked up, it goes through a nerve or something and somebody loses function in their hand. I mean, it's just not worth it. It's not, if you lose a fish every once in a while because of it, so what? You'll get another one. You know what I'm saying? Like the safety certainly is the safety plus is certainly warranted in making that a general policy. And I know that's it's a done deal on Royal Star. If we see those hooks on the top, we it's not even a matter, not that we get any pushback, but it's like we encourage anglers, hey, don't put those on there. And like I said, nobody's going to go, no, damn it, I'm going to fish with them anyway. I mean, everybody takes them off, but if there were a case of somebody being stubborn about it, those things wouldn't be on there anyway. They would just disappear.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, captain wins every argument.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not one that takes much persuasion. I mean, it just makes common sense. So, yeah, I think that we're all going to be a hell of a lot better off for it.
Yeah, I told you we would talk about it a little bit. We just kind of got so much going on, and you and I could keep this going, but I already had you for an hour and a half, and I know you have a life and you're on land right now, and I'm sure you got 9 million things to do. So thank you so much. All of my viewers, everybody wants to thank you. I've said so many people were watching, so many comments. I want to thank you so much, Tim. This has been a wonderful, wonderful show. We'll definitely have you back. We'll talk more about fishing and more about your boat next time. We talked about so much stuff today. That was incredible. Thank you.
Hey, you know what? It's my pleasure. And please invite me back. I love doing this kind of stuff. I love sharing the knowledge that I've acquired over the years. And you can probably tell, man, I mean, we didn't even get into it. I love telling fish stories, man. We could get going and swap tales about crazy stuff that we've seen and done that could, entertain you and I and everybody else for a long, long time. So don't hesitate to invite me back, man. I really enjoyed myself. I love it.
So Tim, do you got any trips available? Royal Star, how do they get a hold of you? What do they want to do? How, real quick?
I'm really glad you brought that up because I just got a call before the show. Tracy, our office manager, told me that we had an angler had to drop off the trip departing tomorrow. It's a 4-day trip. We have one opening on it. It's been chock sock full. It's actually sponsored by Let's Talk Hookup. It's been chock sock full forever. And again, this angler just dropped off today. So we have one spot on this trip departing tomorrow. It's a 4-day trip. It gets back on Wednesday. If you have the opportunity to jump on, give Tracy a call, 619-224-4764. We do, if you want to follow along on our website, Royal Star Sport Fishing, we do have an online booking platform on there. We have trips up already for next year. We do have our 2024 schedule completed. And basically what Tracy does is she posts the trips. As soon as this trip gets in, she posts the next trip that is she posts the next trip that's on the schedule for the following year. Obviously, the people that are on this trip that are on the current trip have first priority as far as rebooking next year goes. But she's posting those trips up as they click off, and then we'll put the whole schedule up by the end of August. But anyway, going back to it, if you do want to book a trip, give Tracy a call. And many a times on our online platform, if there's a trip you want to go on, it'll say that it's full on there. But if that's the one that fits your dates perfectly and it's the right one for you, give her a call, because she does keep a waiting list on each trip, and she's able to work miracles. You know, things happen. A lot of times we get a lot of bookings early because anglers getting off the boat. You know, we've got about a 80%, 85% repeat customers that come fishing with us on the trips every year. But, you know, things come up, guys jump on right away, they make a reservation, and then something comes up where there's a conflict, so they'll have to drop off. So now is a great time to get your name on the list. Even if it says that it's full, give her a call and get your name on the list.
And then what a great opportunity. If someone has 4 days that they can split from work and go fishing, I mean, everything's happening right now. It doesn't get much better than it is right now.
Yeah, it's a great time, you know, between the bluefin out west and this yellowfin that's showing more and more. There's a few yellowtail, even a few dorado now, and the kelps that are showing out in front of Ensenada. So it's a great time. And key, it's going to be epic weather for the next 4 days. Beautiful offshore everywhere. So, you know, that alone is enough to roll the dice on.
Right. And then that boat is like a beautiful floating hotel with some of the most phenomenal food you could ever imagine. We never even talked about that. We could go on forever. We'll be here forever. But you guys have some spectacular chefs on there.
Indeed, it's just yet another component. You know, it's been part of our history on the boat. So we'll get into that next time.
All right. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everybody. Make sure you give Tracy a call. Talk